The Nightingale was written and directed by Jennifer Kent, an Australian film director best known for her work on The Babadook, a horror film that came out 5 years ago, and is also personally one of my favorite horror films of all time. And in this film, we follow a young Irish convict named Claire, who's living in 1800s Tasmania with her husband and her very young child. And when an unspeakably violent tragedy befalls her family, she decides to take revenge on those who committed violence against her, and hires a native man to go with them as her guide. I should give a fair warning to anyone who is curious about this movie because Jennifer Kent is a very accomplished filmmaker already, having only made 2 films, and she is someone who not only does well to make very visually interesting movies, but ones that don't hold back in any way. This is by no means a movie that compromises its content for its audience. It is very disturbing, extremely violent at times, and if someone was to get through the first 20 to 30 minutes of this movie and feel the need to leave, I wouldn't look down upon that decision in any way because this is a very tough film to stomach and has content in here that will likely disturb and offend many people. But the thing is, The Nightingale is a movie that isn't meant to shock or offend. To perfectly describe the way I view this movie, let's take a look at the original Star Wars, because in rewatching a lot of the original Star Wars movies for this channel recently, something I noticed from A New Hope is kind of how I view this movie in particular. In the scene where Luke finds his Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen burned to a crisp by the stormtroopers, something that he does is he definitely is disturbed what he sees and he wants to look away because they're his relatives. He doesn't want to see the skeletons of his family, but nonetheless, he looks back and he has to accept the fact that his family is dead now and he has to live with it. Similarly with The Nightingale, there is a lot of imagery depicted here that will upset and disturb many viewers, but it's displayed in a historical context. People need to know that these things happened because we can't go on in our future accepting that these things happen in our daily lives and just forget about it. History has a place in our lives in which we need to accept that things happened and move forward and try to undo the wrongs of the past. For our culture, with what we've done to Native Americans in the past and violence that still goes on today, I think a story like this from Jennifer Kent's Australian perspective and the horrors that people from her past experienced, I think is necessary for us to see. And with the very mature messages and thought-provoking themes that Jennifer Kent evokes in her storytelling, I think it's very important for people to at least try to suffer through what this movie offers us. It is by no means entertainment, but it has a place in at least letting us know something that happened from our past that is absolutely despicable, so that we can have a reaction to such things and think about how we can improve our own lives as a result. But if Jennifer Kent didn't take all this imagery and this disturbing, violent content and use it for anything but shock value, then certainly it wouldn't have any meaning to our society as a whole, because then it just would have been exploiting people and all these horrible things for no real satisfying reason, honestly. Thankfully, the shocking and disturbing content is no substitute for character work, because The Nightingale is definitely a character and performance-centric film. And I think the way that I was able to see into this is because of Jennifer Kent's use of framing and camera work. You may have noticed from the footage I've already included in this review that The Nightingale was not shot in a widescreen format. Indeed, it was shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's basically the same type of thing where if you watched a VHS tape growing up and the image was cropped to where it would fit your entire tube TV. I guess another modern example of this would be if you're looking through Instagram and you're seeing all of the images and the videos that are on there. That's basically the dimensions of the images which Jennifer Kent shot in her movie. But I think it works because the focus is not on the environments or the visuals. The primary focus of this movie is not to pay attention to the production design or the way that they were able to bring the early 1800s Tasmania to life. I mean, certainly The Nightingale has a lot of great production value to it, and I often felt like I was in that time period instead of watching people playing pretend. Truly, this is a very well done movie, and if the performances weren't as good as they were, I don't think I would have had as strong of a sense of immersion as I did. But that's the fact of the matter here. You know, the performances are so great that I often forgot that I was watching a recreation of history instead of actually reliving it right in front of my eyes. The lead actress, Aisling Franciosi, deserves a lot of credit for her work here because she has to maneuver through a wide variety of emotions that most actors wouldn't even dare to try to go through, especially with the horrible things that they're depicting here. but she does an incredible job. And if the Academy is bold enough to nominate her for an Oscar by the end of this year, I would be all for it, because she definitely gives one of the best performances I've seen all year. And that goes for a lot of other actors in this movie as well. I think any woman who thinks Sam Claflin is a heartthrob before, especially if they watch like the Hunger Games movies where he played Finnick, they are not gonna like this movie one bit, because he plays the most despicable human being imaginable. And he does so with such a precise, committed, and dedicated manner about him that I think he is the most despicable and unfathomably evil person I've seen on screen since Michael Fassbender was in 12 Years a Slave. He does that well with his role, and I think there are more complex things going on with his psyche than just being a capital V villain, but he is definitely a very effective antagonist for what this movie needed. And I like the direction that they took with him in terms of like how he contrasts with the main character, and also the actor who plays the Aborigine guide to Claire. Baykali Ganambarr, who I apologize if I just butchered the name of, does a very good job as well at contrasting what Aisling Franciosi brought to the movie as well. Initially, they did the thing in movies where, you have two very different characters who are going at each other, but the progression from where they were from the beginning to the end was very effective, I think. And because we spend a lot of time with them, their progression from point A to point B was much more believable. And there were a lot of moments laced in between in which you could feel much more at peace and have a little bit of a reprieve from all the horrible things that are otherwise depicted in this movie. With that being said, The Nightingale is very long, running at about 130 minutes. And with the content that is depicted here, I think if you are averse to some very harsh violence, that runtime will start to become a real drag if you're being weighed down by these things. And you're supposed to be. I mean, I certainly was, and I didn't like what I was seeing. But I think because of how effective the performances were and the dynamic way in which Jennifer Kent wrote her characters, I was always invested. I mean, I was repulsed at the same time. But that mix of emotions that I was feeling, I think, is what Kent intended me to feel. And it helped me to be able to get from point A to point B in this movie and be completely riveted and won over by what I saw. Even though The Nightingale is certainly an extremely tough film to watch and is one that I probably won't ever watch again, I at least appreciated the experience enough to say that it actually is one of the best films I've seen this year so far. We have a few more months to see some great films, but this one will probably stand out as the most important one that I saw, just because I feel like the things that were depicted here are necessary for us in order to reckon with the past and try to think about how we can change our future. Jennifer Kent did a marvelous job directing a film again, and I can't wait to see what she does for her third one. With that, I am giving The Nightingale an A-. As far as an age recommendation goes, yeah, this is for adults only. I'm not going to sugarcoat it there. There is some very harsh violence depicted here, some of which is sexual. I mean, you don't see any of the graphicness of it, but you're taking through the sexual violence that is happening, and it's extremely disturbing to sit through. And there is also plenty of murders that go on, whether or not it might be just gun-inflicted wounds or blunt force trauma. And there's also a very disturbing, violent moment involving a baby too. So, like I said, and most of it is already depicted in the first half hour of this movie. So if you get through that and you want to leave, I am not going to judge you in any way, because it's very harsh violence, very frank too about how things were back then. So it's depicted in an historical way, so it's not like it's used in an exploitative manner, but it is very disturbing, so if you can't sit through it, then that's fine. The experience of this movie is probably what I would compare to something like Schindler's List. It's very riveting, and there's a lot of great things to take from it, but it's very exhausting in its content, and I think it is only appropriate for people who are at least 18 years old. Thanks again for watching another one of my reviews, guys. I definitely hope that my next review is much more upbeat than this one. I look forward to more videos coming soon, and if you like this content, please like and subscribe. It really does help me grow my content here. And check out my social media pages that are linked in the description below too, for you will find content there that you wouldn't normally otherwise find here on YouTube. In the end though, thanks for watching as always, and you have a good one.